morning, Rodney.
How are you?
Doing well. Let's just jump right into the deep water. Some big news last week for Alabama football. Nobody left, and that was the big news because Steve Sarkisian, it appears, certainly could have taken the job at Colorado. He withdrew his name from consideration, and this is a big statement for Sarkisian and for Alabama to keep its offensive coordinator, keep that continuity, and a victory for the Crimson Tide. Sometimes, it's just keeping the people that you have that is a big deal, and certainly this is big for Alabama football.
Well, I think so. Continuity, as you've mentioned, Gary. Sarkisian was here 1 year. You've had so much turnover. You went from Dable to Michael Oxley. Both those guys stayed a year. Then Sarkisian, if he would have left, that would have been another year. So the constant turnover, that happens more now. It's not just at Alabama. You look at Georgia, they're on their third offensive coordinator in the last 3 years. So it happens more now, I think, than it ever has. But it's really big when you have a guy like Steve Sarkisian. Certainly they had a fantastic offense last year. I think they have a chance to have another great one this year, but it was important that they keep that continuity with him, have a lot of returning players on the offensive line, some really great back, a stable of running backs. Also, they have you've got Waddle and Devontae Smith coming back. You've got Mac Jones, who's got some experience now at quarterback. You've got the other young quarterbacks that I think bring in a lot of potential. So having him back, his knowledge of the personnel's knowledge of him, their familiarity with him and the system, and all the things that in terms of plays and Gary, how those plays are called. All of those things, I think, contribute to the continuity that's much needed.
I said this earlier. I want to get your reaction to it because I don't know this at all, but clearly that was a tough decision for Sark. You get a chance to be a head coach again in a league that you're very familiar with, having coached at Washington and USC in the Pac-12. You turned that down to stay at Alabama. He's going to get a big raise. There's no doubt about that. But I wonder, Rodney, if, again, we have no way of knowing if it even came up, but certainly Coach Saban made his pitch to keep him. But I wonder if Sark is thinking to himself, well, I stay at Alabama here. I establish myself as a winning offensive coordinator, and I could still be on the staff potentially when Coach Saban decides to retire. Do you think that played a factor in his decision, maybe eyeing the head coaching job here at Alabama down the road?
Well, it certainly could be something that maybe is in the back of his mind. If I were Steve Sarkisian, I would think, if I was very successful here and did a great job here, that I would one day be considered for the position, if maybe hopefully 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it is, down the road that Nick Saban steps down, and you never really know. But, I would certainly think that you do a tremendous job here. You win the confidence of people around here, and I think you certainly could set yourself up for future consideration.
I also said this earlier. Alabama did not have the season that it wanted to have. Injuries were a huge part of it. But you lose at home to LSU. You lose another gut-wrenching game at Auburn. You don't make it to Atlanta. You obviously don't win the division. You don't win the conference. You don't make it to the playoff. You don't even make it to a New Year's Day Six Bowl. But it feels like coming off another good recruiting class, bringing in Charlie Strong, keeping Steve Sarkisian, some other things that have happened staff-wise with Freddie Roach coming in, you sense that Alabama has built some momentum during this offseason. At least I do. Do you agree with that, Rodney?
Well, I think that there's been some positive moves. Again, I think we mentioned Sarkisian. You mentioned Freddie Roach. I think that's probably going to be a real positive because I think that his familiarity with the way Nick Saban does things is certainly something that probably was needed on that side of the ball at that position. So I do think that was a plus. I think they had a fantastic recruiting year, but also another big thing is that they had, I think it was 13 of those guys are here now already getting acclimated. We know about Bryce Young. They have a stable of linebackers that they brought in. Several of them are here now. I think that's all really big to start getting these guys prepared early for what comes in the summer, and then be ready for, obviously going through spring practice is huge. But also going through that August camp, they'll already have a foundation laid, which really gives them a big edge. If you look at over the years, most of the freshmen that have contributed here early, with the exception, I think one that I could remember would be Minka Fitzpatrick, but most of the guys were guys that were early enrollees. So I think that's a real positive. And I do think, too, that Mac Jones got some experience late in the season. Going on the road against Auburn in that atmosphere certainly is a challenging thing. And I think having that he played well, he had the 2 pick sixes. We've talked about that, but still he played really well. And I think that he played well against Michigan. So I think those experiences help him and as you start to move forward.
How do you think Nick Saban will handle quarterbacks in the spring? I mean, obviously Mac Jones has got more experience and did start the final handful of games. You got Bryce Young coming in. You got Talia Tagovailoa and Paul Tyson scholarship quarterbacks on the roster as well. Do you think that Mac Jones gets the majority of the reps? Do you think they split them evenly among the 4? What do you think the plan will be for the quarterbacks during spring?
Well, I think that probably Mac Jones is clearly, when you're talking about a pecking order, he would have to start off number 1. And, again, those experiences that he had last year, the progress that he's made, he's really going into – he's a redshirt junior, so he's going into his 4th year in the program. So he's got a lot of familiarity with it. He's grown considerably in so many ways since he's been here. So, yeah, he's the leader in that room right now. There's no question about that. Now, again, you mentioned the young players, the young talent that's here, and be interesting to see, how that's kind of divvied up. But I think all of them will get their opportunities. I know everyone's really excited to see Bryce Young, and understandably so. That's not taking away. I think that's one thing that, people should not be offended by, that so many people, there's so much excitement to see Bryce Young. Anytime you have a new player, as you know, Gary, especially a quarterback, 5-star player that comes in so highly ballyhooed, people are going to naturally have the excitement to see him and be excited to see what he can do. Again, he's coming in from a program that was one of the top 2 high school programs in the country last year. He played against great competition all across the country. He excelled in all of those games. So it's going to be interesting to see this spring. How does he kind of make that adjustment, here at Alabama, taking the next step to a higher level? I think that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting to watch. And I'm really kind of excited to hear some of the reports as from these from the scrimmages that they have this spring, because I think all of those things are certainly can indicate maybe how he's making progress.
There's going to be a lot of attention on the defense. There has been a lot of conversation, not necessarily at the football complex, but outside the complex on radio shows like this one and others and on the internet about the future of Pete Golding. All indications are that Pete Golding is going to be the defensive coordinator again at the University of Alabama. But you do bring in Charlie Strong as an analyst. We obviously talked about this last week, but how much will, in your opinion, Rodney, Charlie Strong, how much say will he have in this defensive game plan and scheme as a defensive analyst? But as accomplished as he is, how much do you think that Saban and Golding and that defensive staff will turn to Charlie Strong for input on what they're going to do defensively in 2020?
Well, I think anytime you bring in a guy like Charlie Strong, you certainly want to some of his experience, some of the information that he can give you, helpful, beneficial things that he can provide to your defensive side of the ball. I think certainly you want to pick his brain, you want to know what he thinks. Now, again, I think it's right now as an analyst, he's in a support role. He's in a role where they have a system here. Nick Saban has a system, and as someone correctly pointed out, it's not about running someone else's system. It's about running Nick Saban's defense and understanding that and being able to teach that. And I think all of those things are important. Now, how much of that does Charlie Strong come in already familiar with? I really don't know. He's not been on the Nick Saban tree, so to speak. So there's some differences, but that's good because, you can, as I said, Gary, you need to have different ideas. And I think when you have a guy who's been as successful as Charlie Strong has been as a defensive coordinator, he can bring in some really valuable ideas to your what you're trying to do.
Rod, before we close it out, clearly Waddle's back in the return game. He's phenomenal and took over kickoffs late in the year. We know he can do as a punt returner. The coverage team is good. Punting last year was clearly an issue. And place kicking, once again, was an issue. Reichard got hurt. Bulovas, for the most part, was solid, but then in one of the biggest games of the year, at the end of the season down at Auburn, the place kicking issue reared its head again when Bulovas missed a 30-yard field goal late in the game that would have tied the game. How important is it for Alabama this year to get the punting game as far as a punter and get the place kicking game as far as a place kicker solved and be solid from start to finish this year? And that's just something that just seems to hang over this program. How big is that in 2020, in your opinion?
Well, I think it always, those games can cost you. I mean, when you have issues in that area, those areas, it can cost you. We were spoiled a little bit with J.K. Scott. Obviously, did a tremendous job as a punter. I mean, he was off the charts, and but I think P. Ryan stepped in last year and did a fairly nice job when he was called on, and then Bernier had a pretty good, solid outing against, if you remember, against Michigan. But I mean, as you start to look forward, obviously Skylar DeLong is still here. And then we're going to see they've got some walk-ons that are coming in from high school that could certainly make a niche for themselves. We'll see. I think the real key is going to be, how much does Will Reichard, how healthy is he? When is he ready to go? Because I think he's got obviously a lot of talent as a place kicker, but also as a punter, so he could handle both roles. And I think it all just remains to be seen, Gary. It's unpredictable at this point, but you would certainly hope that Will Reichard would be able to contribute some this spring, participate some this spring, and then be 100% ready to go next fall, because he is a guy with a ton of potential.
Yeah, you'd love to see it get to the point when the kicker runs out there that you expect him to make the kick, and that just hasn't been the case around here for some time. That doesn't mean they haven't made some of them, but I don't think there's been a ton of confidence. And as I said last year in the game against Auburn, when you needed a 30-yard field goal to go through the uprights, tie the game, Bulovas missed it. So that's been an issue ongoing. Great stuff as always, Rodney. Of course, TigerInsider.com. The discussion on Alabama sports is nonstop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yep, it's a lot of talk. And, hey, the basketball team had a great performance on Saturday on the road, tremendous performance, over 100 points, and a lot of discussion about that. A lot of discussion about the NFL Combine right now. Gary, I don't know if you saw some of the measurements, but one or two of his hands was actually, his left hand's bigger than his right hand, which may not be usual. I don't know. Yeah, it measured 10 inches. Yeah. So, but anyway, yeah, a lot of that discussion right now on TigerInsider.com. It's only $48 a year. You can get instant access with your credit card or with a check there at TigerInsider.com. All right, buddy. Take care.
And as Rodney said, the Combine is cranking up in Indianapolis.